Hi, everybody, and welcome to this new episode of Ecosystem Perspectives. Our guest today is none other than Dede Haas, a good friend of mine from a while back. Dede basically is a channel strategist, a practitioner within channel and alliances, and a coach. Dede has a long history in the channel, dating back to Intel and Surety. And right now she's a columnist with the Channel Executive and also affiliated with the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals. Welcome, Dede.
Thank you. Will?
You bet. It's good to see you again. So, Dede, you and I have go back quite a while, and I wanted to kind of start off by giving some of our audience a little bit of kind of the I guess if I may use the term, the wisdom that we gained over the years. So if you wanted to kind of look back at relationship building, right? And today we're people are talking about relationship building in the cloud era, and how do you see it differently today from what it used to look like in the past? I'm really curious to get your your impression of what you're seeing that's changing.
The number of partners for large companies and some mid-sized companies are now numbering into the thousands, as opposed to being in the hundreds. So the lack of a personal relationship is there, and there's nothing you can do about it because quantity was something that was very important. So what I have found is that going through the years, the 80s into the 90s and then into the 2000s, is that there's not as much personal working relationship where you actually sit down with your partner, and if you are a certain size company. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the SMBs, vendors out there, the small, medium-sized vendors, still don't deal with just tens or hundreds. They do. So they can have a more personal relationship.
What you're seeing essentially is a loss of this personalized. So scale has become a challenge, in your opinion. I mean, is that one of the key? What are some of these key challenges that you're seeing with managing, these kinds of channel massive scaling or alliance management? What are some of those key challenges?
So when you're a smaller company, you can still have these intimate relationships, like I had mentioned, if you only have a couple hundred partners. When you're a larger company, you just have people that sign up for your program. And so the challenge, of course, is having some sort of relationship. Well, unless it's some super duper partner who's $1 billion partner, those big companies aren't going to have an intimate or close working relationship with their partners. And by the way, their partners know that. And so partners will be a Microsoft partner, or they'll be an Intel partner, and this will be like on the processor side, on the hardware side. And they'll be partners with other large companies, Cisco. And so they know going in that they are one of thousands. So they know that they're not going to have a partner manager or channel manager that's going to come and work with them directly. That's probably not going to happen unless they are some whiz bang and partner who sells millions and millions of dollars of product for the larger company. So when they sign up, they realize that they're going to be one of thousands. The one thing that they do expect is that the vendors understand the business that they are running and what type of business that is. And the requirements to be in the partner program or changes that are made midstream in the partner program that may not benefit them at all and actually could hurt them. So you may not need to have that close working relationship, but what you do need is to have an understanding of your partners for whatever particular programs you have. These large companies don't have just one program. They have a number of programs. So I'm going to give you a little story. There's a large company that has a program for small, medium business partners, and they have a couple of hundred in the program. So what that means is is that they actually can have a closer working relationship with them. And I was asked to take a look at their incentive program. And the incentive program was sent to me in PDF, and it was like 30 pages long. And it had all these requirements for these small, medium business partners. And they said, we can't get them to join or do anything with this. They're not taking advantage of it. And I told them, I'll tell you right now what the problem is. I said, you're talking to SMB people, and you're this big company, and you're asking them to go above and beyond for one program that they're in. They could be in a whole bunch of other channel programs, but you're asking them to go above and beyond for some sort of benefit or payout that isn't worth it for them, because it's going to cost more for them to be involved in the incentive program. And so that's what I mean about understanding your partner's business.
It's fascinating that you mentioned this, because kind of we've been talking about the vendor side of things and how the vendors are looking at this sprawl of partners. But you could also, like you just mentioned, you could look at it from the opposite perspective. And you've got these partners that are also having to deal with multiple vendors.
Correct.
And so, these kind of very, individualized supposed experiences by each one of the partners, assuming they do understand the business, is kind of interesting. But it seems, and we've heard it from many partners, which is like they want to give us a customer experience, but in reality, it's their experience. But guess what? My user has to go to 30 other vendors, and each one of them is a totally different experience. So it's not that much of a good overall partner experience if you kind of look at it from the partner perspective. But here it raises an interesting point, which is, how do you feel the power dynamics between vendor and partner has changed, if any? And what are the implications going forward? Like, is it like, does the vendor still exert the same kind of domination over the partners that they used to 20 or 30 years ago? Has that changed? Do the partners have a lot more choice? Does the vendor have to adjust a little bit more to what the partners are trying to get accomplished? How are you seeing these power dynamics in the marketplace, Dede?
I think right now that it is how it's like when it's home buying, it's a buyer or seller's world. I think this is the partner's world right now. It's becoming the partner's world. Like what Jay McBain has mentioned is that the number of software vendors has increased. And so instead of having 10,000 software vendors because of people who have as a service type of product, it's now 100,000. So, but you've got these partners out there, these small system integrators, SMB VARs, even mid-size VARs and managed service providers. You have all of those. There haven't been a lot of them started in the 2000s compared to the 80s and 90s. So the number of channel partners in this world were really started by the boomer generation, because they started in the 80s. And that number is going down. So now it's the partners world, because you have fewer partners, more vendors, and more vendors running after these partners. For Channel Executive Magazine, for their bi-monthly issue, I would interview 2 partners, and I would have pretty direct questions about vendors to them. And they were very disappointed overall with the way that they were treated by many vendors, especially the larger companies, who I always say should know better. But one of the things that they told me was, look, I can always go to somebody else. Back in the day, that wasn't always the case. But now it is, because you're having fewer and fewer partners. And if they really don't like the way that they're being treated, they can go sell for somebody else.
Fascinating, because in reality, that power dynamic that used to exist, like you're saying, is clearly now kind of favoring more and more those guys that are closest to the market. And a lot of people are starting to talk about changes in channel approach as a result. And one of the salient things you mentioned, Jay, a minute ago, Jay McBain at Forrester, the ecosystem approach. How do you see the ecosystem approach different from the traditional channel approach? And what are the opportunities that you think it opens up if you look at things, be you a partner or be you a vendor, if you look at things from an ecosystem, kind of multifaceted ecosystem approach as opposed to a channel approach?
The ecosystem opens it up to other types of companies and organizations to be involved. And I'm going to tell you another little story. So when I was at Intel, we had a traditional channel, but one of the things that we did was we actually had partners helping partners working together, because we would have partners that were very good at the selling side of the product, but they didn't have the manpower or to do all of the implementations of the software and the installation. And so they would actually partner with another partner in our program for them to do the installation or for the training. So we had these smaller kind of ecosystems. We never called them that, but we did have these smaller ecosystems back in the day. And when I say back in the day, with ladies into the 90s. But for the ecosystems today, they include so many more different types of companies. So you've got the partner relationship management companies, marketing companies that are involved. You've got your more traditional VARs and then managed service providers and systems integrators. And the vendor, I think, has a more difficult time with this. For one thing, they don't know how to manage something so big, because it's not like just a homogeneous group of people of VARs. It's like all these different companies that they have to manage their relationships with and get their partners to work with. Like if they have some marketing company that's going to work with the partners to market to those partners' customers, then there's going to have to be some sort of relationship created there. And that was not always the case back in the day. So if these vendors have a hard enough time as it is trying to manage all these thousands of just, let's say, VARs or MSPs, now they got all these other different companies that are coming on board, and they're having to help establish these relationships and manage that whole thing. And that's a problem.
It's a problem for sure, because what we're seeing in the market is that this, what you kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, which is this understand your partner approach, a one-size-fits-all kind of portal approach, which used to be the typical go-to channel solution. Let's just spin up a portal and just send. It no longer works, because there's so much of these different kind of nodes and different customizability elements to an ecosystem, that this traditional approach of a one-size-fits-all, like you said before, no longer is working. And so what we've seen from an ecosystem perspective is a dire need for this to be able to attend to the variability within the channel with maybe different enablement mechanisms, different touch points, different approaches, different strategies, marketing, go-to-market, all that kind of stuff. Is that what people are referring to, in your opinion, when talking about the emergence of alliance or channel automation? How is it manifesting itself to you? What kind of technology tools are organizations kind of going towards to move out of this kind of a very rigid world of just a channel portal kind of an approach to a much more malleable ecosystem approach? What are they doing?
Well, I can tell you that for the last couple of years, there were a lot of companies out there that were trying to make themselves, like you said, a portal, or that they were a partner management, partner relationship management system, and they tried to make themselves everything for everybody. And they had a couple of problems, because I got contacted by these guys all the time, and I got more demos on this software. And one of the things that they were trying to do was to try and be affordable and have everything available to everybody. And it just wasn't working. Many of them never got off the ground. They were either startups or they didn't do as well as they had hoped. And to this day, Jay McBain does have a list of some of these companies, but really there are fewer than you would think these days, especially with the ecosystem, because they're not honing in on at least one part of the ecosystem. I truly believe that you just cannot manage the entire ecosystem by one product or service. It's just not possible. You have to be very specific, or that particular application has got to have like a menu list of what you can choose as a service that best fits your needs. If you're going to want to manage your ecosystem, you're going to have to think about a couple of things when you're thinking about how to manage them. And some of these, relationship management systems or portals can be helpful to these partners of yours. Maybe it's not a good idea to have 100,000 partners. Maybe it's better to go for the quality rather than the quantity. That might be the first thing that you might want to do, because I see that people celebrate. We have 5,000 partners now. Great. How many are selling for you? Why are you wasting your time? Maybe you can save more money in being more on the quality side and finding your niche with particular partners within that ecosystem. I think that people have been looking too broadly, and there's so much out there now that they have to kind of hone themselves back in. We didn't have to worry about that back in the 80s and the 90s, but they do have to do that now.
Yeah, and we in terms of the tools, what we're seeing with the ecosystem, we've kind of we're on that list. We're part of that ecosystem tool, layout or landscape that Jay published as TIDWIT. The interesting thing is we kind of divided it into a Venn diagram of 3 areas. One is the traditional kind of like lead management between partners and stuff like that, kind of PRM-ish, as you mentioned. We've got the marketplace kind of circle that has a lot of marketplace tools that kind of tries to join people through marketplaces or ecosystems through a marketplace. And then we've got the enablement one. And interestingly, what we're finding is we're focused on the enablement one, but what we're finding is that organizations, more than wanting to, to kind of jump or rip and replace what they've got, is they want to be able to interconnect it with those out there. So they're looking to join kind of an ecosystem network that helps them do that. From an enablement perspective, kind of we're focused on that area. From the other perspectives, we haven't seen that development just yet, but that's a great opportunity, I think, for organizations to consider. But that interconnectivity element is something that a lot of the organizations are really kind of yearning for, because they don't want to rip and replace the legacy system that they've invested tens of millions in. They just want to be able to interconnect it with people and make things easier. Taking that into account, Dede, what do you think are key trends going forward? And now that we've been through this everything around COVID, and so many people have jumped, it's accelerated digital transformation clearly for a lot of companies. If out of no choice, really, they've had to do it. Do you think there's a reversal possible, or do you think this is something where that this is going to have to, the train has left the station and there's just no way of going back to the old channel world? We really have to focus on things going forward and seeing how, what is your take on this? Or has it gone too far? Do you think that this relationship building element that you were talking about, a few minutes ago, do you think there's a risk for that being lost if we go too far? What's your take on this?
I think that the relationship element has been left by the wayside a long time ago. And I think that the problem is that companies don't know how to do it, because they are in it. So now they're in this ecosystem and there's thousands of them. And so these software companies, they don't know what to do. They haven't had the training. They don't have people that have institutional memory. They're not hiring the people with institutional memory and experience. Those people are a little bit older these days and not as much inclined to go back to work. And so I think that the relationship part has suffered. I think we had great relationships back in the 80s and into the 90s, and I think that they've suffered greatly in the 2000s. because people wanted to rely on everything to automate everything. Oh, if I automate everything, I don't have to be talking to my partners. Well, yeah, you still do. Even if it means that it's something automated that talks to them, you have to actually speak to them and let them know that you understand what they're going through and that you're putting them into a program, or the program that you've got is going to be doing something that benefits them, because that's what the most important thing is. It's whatever benefits them. Things are just in flux. There's no stability right now. Here's the deal. We're talking about an ecosystem. And so you and I have a particular idea of what that means. And so does Jay, and so do a number of other people. But that doesn't mean that all these other people out there have the same idea of what an ecosystem means. Because I've had this discussion before with somebody who said, well, this certain large company said that their ecosystem is simply their marketplace, and that's what an ecosystem is. Well, no, that may be their ecosystem, but that isn't necessarily company B's ecosystem. And so I think that there has to be some sort of understanding, and I think Jay had tried to put that in place in some way to make some sort of standard. I think the problem is that when you let companies go out willy-nilly to whatever it is that they think that they should be doing, and they're not bringing other people in. I worked for Intel for 12 years, and believe me, Intel was big on bringing people together to form a standard. And I think that that's something that should be done. I think Jay's about it on trying to put some sort of standard together. And then what does that mean with relationships? And what does that mean in managing all of these people?
It's fascinating, because you've made two very key points. One is that different organizations have different ecosystems, and they can't all be under one ecosystem. And so the linkages between ecosystems and the standardization of those linkages becomes one of the key elements. The other point that I think you made, which is also fascinating, is that these tools and these technologies that are emerging are not designed to replace the relationship. They're actually designed to boost it, so that it gives time for the people, the alliance managers and the alliance guys, to actually have more time, not to do the mundane stuff of, send me this document, send me this, this glossy or this, PDF or whatever it is, but rather, now that's all automated. Now I can have a conversation with you and ask you how business is, and how, how the real meat, where the real meat, where it really counts. This comes to the last question, actually, which is, how do you see the role of an alliance manager moving forward? Is that role, do you think, still relevant, and will it continue to be relevant? The alliance manager or the PAM, the partner account manager, do you think those are relevant today? Do you think they're more relevant today? How do you see it, playing out into the future for these guys?
Well, I want to just say one thing before I jump into the CAM or PAM, channel account manager, partner account manager. The automation that you mentioned, you're absolutely right. It is not supposed to take the place of the relationship, though that's what a lot of vendors have been doing. It is a resource, just like every other resource that you have available as a vendor to help your partners build their business selling your stuff. And that's how it should be treated, as a resource. Getting to the CAM and the PAM, they're a resource too, a human resource. So no matter how many partners you have, and no matter how big of a vendor you are, small, medium business, or huge enterprise, you need to have these people. Even if you have thousands of partners, you need to have channel account, partner account managers on board. They are the most important thing you've got as your resource and as your line into the partner world. These people should be experienced with relationship building and maintaining relationships and managing their partners to success. So these are people that have been doing this, and that is their main function. It's also that they are this liaison between you, the vendor, and your partners, to understand what the partners are looking for. And if you've done something and they're not particularly happy and sales go down, it's your CAM who's going to understand that or be able to run interference for it. You need to have a CAM or a PAM. You absolutely. And in fact, I think that they're more important than ever. They're more important than ever because stuff gets automated and people, like you said, a lot of people think that that takes the place of the relationship and it shouldn't. So if you automate everything and you get rid of your channel account manager group, I would love to pose this question to some of these companies. What do you think is going to happen?
Exactly.
They're not going to sell for you. You're not going to make money on it.
They're going to go and work for somebody else. They're going to do a good job, and the sales are going to move somewhere else as opposed to you. So I couldn't
exactly. They're going to, because they rely on you. I still have relationships with my partners from Intel, and it's been some of them have been almost 25 years.
Wow.
Because that's how close we got. And the trust. How do you build trust with an application? I mean, you can trust the application works, but they're not going to, your partners aren't going to want to work or sell stuff for a vendor unless they trust them. And how do they trust them? You've got somebody there that's got their back, and that's the CAM.
I couldn't agree more, Dede. And I thank you so much for your insight and your experience that speaks for itself. It's all about building relationships, and couldn't agree that it's all about trust as well. Dede Haas, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for sharing this experience with the community. If anybody is interested in reaching out to Dede, Dede is on LinkedIn. And of course has a ton of experience to share with you as well. So thank you all for joining, and thanks again, Dede, for your wise and experienced words. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Will. I had a lot of fun.